Everyone is looking at the headlines about a ceasefire in Lebanon and thinking the storm has passed, that the ink on a piece of paper signed in a climate-controlled room in Washington or Paris actually changes the terminal velocity of a collapsing region. If you believe that, you are still playing in the shallow end of the pool while the sharks are circling underneath. You see a pause, a huddle being that looks good on a teleprompter, but I see a calculated reorganization of a failing state and a superpower that is starting to realize its pockets aren't bottomless. We are witnessing the SUBP-DOP of an era, and most people are too busy cheering for a 10-day break in the killing to notice the Banshet Ka for the next decade of chaos is already being printed. Let us start with the autopsy of the Iranian regular Navy, which is, for all intents and purposes, dead. This is Tambakso 155 conventional warships have been sent to the bottom of the sea or forced into a permanent, humiliating retreat. We are talking about frigates like the Alvan class, patrol boats, and destroyers that were supposed to be the pride of Tehran, the Dung Blai of their maritime power, now reduced to scrap metal and acoustic signals for the fish. They are Vodun. They are relics of a 20th century dream that met the 21st century reality of high-precision saturation strikes. And when you see $1 billion destroyer sinking because of a coordinated swarm of Rathekang Unipier, you aren't just looking at a military loss, you are looking at the death of a doctrine. But don't be naive enough to think that means the threat is gone. That is the first sas baldi of the mainstream media. The Iranians have pivoted to what I call the Mosquito Strategy, a maritime guerrilla war that turns the Strait of Hormuz into a lethal maze, a matran strain of death, where size is a liability and speed is the only currency that matters. And they have between 3,000 and 4,000 fast attack craft, small, nimble, and terrifyingly cheap, hidden in tunnels, under piers, and inside civilian buildings along the jagged coast. They are waiting, they are breathing, they are the 16 bond blang under the water and the 4,000 shadows on the surface. Think about the math for a second, because the math is where empires go to die. Economics is the ultimate dinjan. 800 to 900 of these boats are armed with anti-ship missiles like the Noor or the Qader. You have a $100 million F-35C flying over a $1,000 plastic boat. You have a $2 million SM-6 interceptor being fired to stop a $20,000 drone. Let that sink in. That is not a war. That is an economic hemorrhage. That is Chalvai Miwa Dromtok. You cannot win a war of attrition when your Tavan Trondage is 100 to 1 against you. It is a Thamahoa for the US Treasury, and the Iranians know it. They don't need to sink the entire US Navy. They just need to make it too expensive for the US Navy to exist in the Persian Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz is only 50 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. It is a bottleneck, a physical diemgen that dictates the pulse of the global economy. It is a place where the rules of traditional naval warfare go to burn. Iran is using these swarms to create a matran of confusion where the United States Navy's Aegis combat systems are overwhelmed by clutter. They cannot tell a fishing boat carrying a family from a suicide drone boat carrying 100 kilograms of C4 until it is too late. It is strong étaf to think that technology solves everything. Sometimes sheer volume and Siodi and Ruf are the only technologies that matter. Washington is trying to use the same tactics they used against drug smugglers in the Caribbean back in September of 2025. They killed over 160 people in those operations. Thinking they could map that blueprint onto the Persian Gulf, they thought a kuva in the Caribbean would translate to a kuva in the Middle East. But a drug cartel doesn't have a sovereign state's talk worth of man-portable air defense systems and radar-guided missiles. They don't have the bon foray of 1,000 years of history. The Americans are trying to apply a police mindset to a civilizational struggle, and it is failing. While the military side of Tehran is bleeding, the financial side is in a state of absolute shambles, a subproduct of the internal economy that is being masked by bravado. They tried to play the role of the neighborhood bully by charging a toll for ships passing through the strait. They wanted $1 per barrel, thinking they could force the world to pay for their survival. A hostile takeover of the world's most important trade route. The result was a pathetic joke. They managed to issue only 60 permits, and they haven't seen a single cent of that money. When you're Thautum TAA and 8 failed shipments, you aren't a superpower. You are a failing business with a lot of guns and no customers. This brings us to the desperate gambit of President Masoud Pezeshkian. He is standing in front of the Chinese Red Cross, begging for help while telling Beijing that they are the real target of the Americans. He is trying to convince Xi Jinping that Iran is just the appetizer, and China is the main course on the Ban for Langa. It is a classic Kong Ranskant's Ghana scenario, inviting the dragon in to keep the eagle away. But the dragon isn't biting. Beijing is playing the long game, the Pax Sinica game. They have offered plenty of words, plenty of Goaijiao, and very little Dongtinten, very little actual cash or hardware. They are watching Iran bleed out, waiting to see if they can buy the ruins for pennies on the dollar later. Why fight a war when you can buy the graveyard? The alliance between Tehran and Beijing is as stable as a house of cards. Pezeshkian knows that if he falls, his strategic partners will be the first ones to loot his corpse. He is trying to use China as a kon bamaomi ka, a bargaining chip for future talks with the West. But he is playing a hand with no aces. He is a man trapped between a matrastran of internal dissent and a ban for of external indifference. The Chinese are looking at the Tilo Tradijon too, and they realize that supporting a dying regime is a bad investment. Inside Iran, the regime is so terrified of its own people that it is importing foreign mercenaries to maintain order. This is the Sriracha turn IT that the news ignores. They are bringing in the Fatimiyun from Afghanistan and the Zainabiyun from Pakistan. When you have to hire foreigners to guard your street corners, you have already lost the Thien Min, the mandate of heaven. You are no longer a government. You are an occupying force in your own capital. These militias are being divided into 3 security zones. A Bonshipkate for survival that looks more like a prison layout than a city plan. They are the ones setting up the checkpoints and searching houses in Tehran and Balochistan. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, is so hollowed out by recent strikes and internal Shali mud that they don't even trust their own soldiers to keep the peace. They are afraid that a local boy from Tehran won't fire on his own mother when the bread riots start again. So they bring in someone who doesn't speak the language, someone who only understands the Dongtinten and the order to kill. It is a brutal, pragmatic calculation that shows just how thin the ice has become for the supreme leader. Meanwhile, the ripples of this conflict are hitting Europe in a way that the mainstream media is completely ignoring. The United States is delaying weapon shipments to the Baltics and Scandinavia. Why? Because the arsenal of democracy is running on empty. The transfer of global supply chains is snapping. The missiles that were supposed to protect Poland or Estonia, the Patriots, the NASAMS, the HIMARS, are being diverted to the carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. In the Arabian Sea, Washington is telling its NATO allies that if they want their toys, they should have helped clear the mines in the Strait of Hormuz. It is a cold, hard kuva, a slap in the face to the old world order. The Americans are shifting back to a modern version of the Monroe Doctrine from the 1820s. They are blacklisting 26 people in the Western Hemisphere for cooperating with adversaries. They are telling the world, if you touch Chinese money or Iranian oil in our backyard, you are dead to us. This isn't about democracy or human rights. It is about the Ban for Laga. the Great Chessboard. The United States is building a wall around its interests and letting the rest of the world figure out how to pay their own bills. They are tired of being the global policeman. While their own treasury is being drained by asymmetric rascals and speedboats, look at the F-16 Fighting Falcons and the F-35CS flying over the Gulf. They are impressive. Yes, they are technological marvels. That costs more than the GDP of some small nations. But they are also relics of a time when we thought superiority meant having the most expensive equipment. In the new reality, superiority belongs to the one. Who can sustain the shouty miutranan, the white bleeding of resources, the longest? Iran is trying to make the Americans bleed money until they quit. The Americans are trying to make the Iranians bleed legitimacy until they collapse. It is a race to the bottom, and the bottom is a very dark place. And Lebanon, the ceasefire there is Amman Grisic, a theater production for the Njinger Nje Tafa. Israel is already being accused of violations within hours of the deal. Everyone is just catching their breath before the next round of Leo Thing, the next step in the escalation ladder. You don't solve a multi-generational religious and territorial war with a PDF document and a handshake. You just reload. The HHLUB of this pause will be a more violent explosion in the future because none of the underlying DT, and NEN have been addressed. Donald Trump is posting on social media calling for peace and warning Hezbollah to behave. It is a performance for the voters back home. A way to look like the Njimmer hung. While the actual machinery of war continues to grind in the background, he knows that a 10-day ceasefire is just a tactical pause, not a strategic solution. He is playing the bond pool for domestic consumption. While the real players in the IRGC and the Mossad are moving their pieces into position for the Trendash Ould Kamer, the real story isn't the Hada being talked about in the White House. The real story is the 16 shadows under the water in the Strait of Hormuz. Those Ghadir Midget submarines aren't going anywhere. They are silent, they are small, and they are sitting on the seabed, waiting for the magnetic signature of a multi-billion-dollar hull to pass overhead. They are the Vadund weapons that turn out to be the most Sakalorum tools of destruction. They don't need to win a battle. They just need to create one thamana that closes the strait for a month. If that happens, the global economy doesn't just slow down, it stops. We are witnessing the death of the petrodollar and the birth of a chaotic, multipolar mess. The sournier, the four, the innocence of thinking that a signature on a piece of paper can stop 1,000 years of geography and grievance is a luxury we can no longer afford. The Matransra is too complex for simple solutions. When the Ding Tien stops flowing in dollars and starts flowing in yuan or gold, the Obavi of the West will simply evaporate. We are already seeing the first signs of this SOPDAP in the way allies are treating each other. You can listen to the analysts on television talk about diplomatic breakthroughs and stabilization. Or you can look at the price of a barrel of oil and the empty weapons crates in Eastern Europe. One tells you a fairy tale designed to keep the stock market from panicking. The other tells you the sure turnii, the naked truth of a system that has reached its limit. The Matastron is shifting. The old alliances are fraying. And the people who think they are the masters of the board are starting to realize that the board is on fire. Stay awake. The next notification won't be about a ceasefire. It will be about the bill coming due for a system that has finally run out of credit. The Iranian Navy didn't just collapse because of bombs. It collapsed because it tried to fight a 21st century war with a 20th century mindset. So they thought big ships meant big power. They learned the hard way that in the age of the drone, big ships are just big targets. The West is at risk of making the same mistake, thinking that their leverage is still as heavy as it was 30 years ago. It is not The leverage has moved to the ones who control the who are willing to use Prathia Kongoniapie to destroy billion-dollar assets. It is a brutal, ugly, and effective way to change the world. Don't wait for the coup d'âme of history to land. Before you decide where you stand, the signals are all there. If you know how to read the Tinath, Amha Hak Adek, beneath the noise of the media, the empire is tired, the rebels are desperate, and the dragon is patient. This is the Banshit K for the next decade, a world of swarms, mercenaries, failed tolls, and broken promises. It is not a pretty picture, but it is the only one that reflects the reality of the Bonfort Lega. The 16 shadows are still there. They are watching the F-35s fly by, knowing that every flight hour costs the Americans more than the entire BE and Bonn Iranian submarine program. They know that time is on their side. And in this game, time is the only currency that actually matters. You can have all the Conger Nothidi in the world, but if you can't afford to use it, you are Vodun. That is the lesson of the Strait. That is the lesson of the Mosquito Strategy. The Basi Primatrumius. The autopsy, the patient, is the old world order, the Pax Americana, and the cause of death is a combination of arrogance and bad math. The funeral has already started. Most people just haven't noticed the black suits yet because they are too busy looking at the man Garricket on their screens. They are waiting for a happy ending that isn't coming. So keep your eyes on the Strait. Keep your eyes on the Dang Tien. Everything else is just a distraction, a matrantra, designed to keep you from seeing the SUPDP Dabi until it is already over. The world is changing, not through grand treaties, but through the Chabadamashtrantran of resources and the Diem Jain of geography. History doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes with the sound of 1,000 small engines screaming across the water. That is the sound of the future. It is cheap, it is loud, and it is coming for everything you thought was stable. The Vodun nature of traditional power is being exposed every single day, from the streets of Tehran, where foreign mercenaries hold the line, to the halls of Brussels, where leaders realize their obobete is full of holes. The realization is sinking in. The old ways are gone. We are in the Matranser now, and there is no blue pill to take you back to the way things were. The ceasefire will end, the swarms will return, and the Bakhorlanga will continue to claim its victims, one, the, Anj, Jenin at a time. Stay sharp, or you will find yourself as just another statistic in the Shalzi Mehed Trung trait of a dying era. The shadows are moving, the math is clear. The end of the Pax Americana isn't a single event, it is 1,000 small cuts. And the blade is currently held by a man in a plastic boat with a $20,000 missile. Think about that the next time you hear a politician talk about harbing. The price of peace is being paid in blood and deng tentinen, and the bill is getting higher every second. Let's look deeper into the matin sron of the Iranian internal collapse. When Pezeshkian begs China for help, he isn't just asking for money. He is asking for a ban shedka for survival. He sees how the CCP maintains control, and he wants that Kong and Nolderfi of repression. But China is cautious. They don't want to be tied to a sinking ship. They are watching the Chalbi Miwad of the youth who are fleeing the country. These are the real threats to the regime, more than any American carrier. The IRGC knows this. That is why they are so focused on the Mosquito Strategy abroad. It is a distraction from the SUPP DOPIT at home. If they can keep the world focused on the Strait of Hormuz, they can keep their own people from focusing on the fact that the Dong Tenten is being stolen by the elite. It is a Mongris Gursike on a national scale, but the Ringeradain are no longer Anje Tafo. They see the mercenaries. They see the checkpoints, They know that the ban four-way is being played with their lives as the pawns. And what about the teen Huv Amin Hawk of the global markets? The smart money is already moving. They are exiting the petrodollar and looking for a Sadi Zaidi to avoid. They see the Zelabi of a US military that is overstretched and underfunded. They see the vaunted nature of a superpower that can't even secure a 50-kilometer wide strait against a group of mosquitoes. This is the S-PA of confidence, which is the precursor to the S of UPRAS dot. The Americans are trying to pivot to the Monroe Doctrine 2.0, which is because they know they can't hold the whole world anymore. They are retreating to their Ba 4 in the Western Hemisphere, trying to lock down Latin America and the Caribbean. But even there, the Mata Stren of Chinese investment is already deep. The Kuba they are trying to deliver to their neighbors is often too little, too late. The Dong Tingtian from Beijing is already there, building ports, mines, and 5G networks. This is the Surchai turning Tursi. The U.S. is no longer the only game in town. The Bond for Alaga has multiple players now, and some of them are playing for keeps, while the U.S. is playing for the next election cycle. That is a DI Su in Gen in strategy that is almost impossible to overcome. You can't win a long-term struggle when your Bunsikane changes every 4 years. The Iranians and the Chinese know this. They are patient. They are waiting for the Shani Mihatrang to do its work. Let's talk about the 16 Bommel blank. Again, these Ghadir submarines are a perfect metaphor for the new era. They are small, they are hard to detect, and they are extremely dangerous in confined spaces. They represent the shift from superiority to asymmetry in the open ocean. They are Vodun, but in the D'Angen of the strait, they are kings. This is the lesson for the modern age. Context is everything. Your $100 million jet is Vodong if it has nowhere to land or if its fuel supply is cut off by a $20,000 drone. The Matassur of the 21st century is one where the small can kill the large, where the cheap can destroy the expensive, and where the Engineer NJ Tithu are the first to be sacrificed. The ceasefire in Lebanon is just a Mangrisic tick to buy time, a tactical pause in a much larger trend cod. A head of this conflict will be felt for decades, as the banker is fundamentally reordered. The Baxi sees the signs of terminal decline. The Chai Mao is too great, the Demngana too many, and the Dong Tintin is running dry. The SUBP DOPIT is not a question of if, but when. And when it happens, it won't be a grand explosion. It will be a quiet SUBP DOP of systems that simply stop working because the math no longer adds up. Stay awake. Watch the Ding Tian. Ignore the man, Jinnik. The surd is in the numbers. In the Tile, Trocide, and in the 16 Ban Blang, waiting under the water, the game is far from over. But the rules have changed forever. The Pax Americana is dead, and we are just waiting for the world to realize it. The Matan Fren is the new reality, and only the Sakalem and the pragmatic will survive the Shanti Mahwad Tramden. The Mosquito Strategy isn't just a military tactic, it's a philosophy for the new world. It's about being small, being many, and being persistent. It's about finding the DA in your opponent's system and squeezing until it breaks. It's about realizing that Vodun is a relative term to the Americans. The Iranian speedboats are Vodun until they start sinking ships. To the Iranians, the American carriers are Vondun because they are too expensive to risk in a fight. This is the Banse for we are on. It's a game of perceptions and Tili Tracidined. And right now, the perceptions are shifting and the math is moving against the old order. The SUBP DOM of the Iranian Navy was just the first act. The SUBP DOT of the global trade system as we know it is the next. And the HETRL UBE will be felt by everyone, from the billionaires in New York to the families in Tehran. Don't be NJ Ayat 4. The HLAA being you see on the news is a lie. It's a mongoose just signed to keep you calm, while the Sudshal is much more Thamatea and much more Saklen. The world is a matarstron of competing interests, and the only way to win is to understand the Bonkar of the enemy. The Basi Photo Dejiji has spoken. The autopsy is complete. The Jemotan continues. The Dimngan are tightening, and Muisal Bomden are still there waiting in the silence of the deep. The Pax Americana has run out of time, and the Pax Sinica is still just a dream. What remains is the Matrastron, a chaotic, violent, and pragmatic reality where only the strongest and the most Saquem will survive. The Deng Tian is the blood of the Bon Four, and right now the blood is flowing away from the heart of the old empire. The Esu Dapi is inevitable, the Hal Luvi will be global, and the Enger and Tatha will be left wondering what happened to the world they thought they knew. But for those who can read the Tin Hiaf Am Areche, the answer has been there all along, hidden in the Din Shen and the matter transference of a dying era. The ceasefire will fail, the swarms will return, the Dong Tintin will shift, and the Bon For Langa will continue its relentless grind. Stay sharp, stay pragmatic, and never, ever be Ange Tafor. Enough to believe the headlines. The Surat is much darker, much more Vodun for the weak, and much more Sakilem for those who hold the blade. The end of the Pax Americana isn't a tragedy, it's just physics. And in the Matran strain, physics is the only thing that never lies. As we look at the final Banshake, we see a world where the Diem and Gen are the new borders, where the Mosquito Strategy is the new standard of power, and where the 16 Balim Blang are the new masters of the sea. The Esu BP Bape is here, the Matranzar is our new home, and Basi Frumitru from a while does is just here to document the Chalama. The math is done, the bill is due, and the S upili et op is just beginning. Think about the H et el ubui of a world where the US can no longer protect the DNH. What happens to the price of your bread when shipping insurance for a tanker triples overnight? What happens to your dang tenon when the Petro-dollar is no longer the world's reserve? This is the Tamahea that is being prepared in the Matran Sea of the Middle East. It's not about Lebanon, it's not about Gaza, it's about the Bon For Lagai and the SUP Dapa of the system that kept the world stable for 80 years. The Injer Enja Tao will keep looking at the Mon Giriskis Grak on their screens, hoping for Hoe Bing, but the Sakalim will look at the Tilatrane and the Shalve Miwad Trane, and they will prepare for the SUP Tok. They will see the Banshit Kent for what it is, a plan for a new world order, built on the ruins of the old one, and in that new world, the Mosquito is king, and the D. Yimshin is the only law that matters. The Basi, Fruma True, Al, Mole, his tools, the autopsy's over, the SFUP.B is recorded, the Matranstrain is the future. Stay awake, because the next notification won't be a headline, it will be the sound of the 16 Bon Blang, Black finally making their move. And by then, it will be too late for the Niger Anye Thoth to do anything but watch the supop of everything they ever believed in. The Bonfor is moving, the Dung Ten Ten is shifting. The end is just the beginning of a much more Thamhaiya and Saklame reality. Stay sharp. The Matran Sain is waiting,